Okay, cool. I'll share my screen. Let's see. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome, great. Yeah, so this is focus group 4. Essentially, we're going to be doing the homework problem or the query that JD didn't get to yesterday. Mainly reviewing joins and unions. We're going to get a little bit into the nuances of prices for different assets as well, because yesterday we did a price feed for just one asset. And that'll prepare us well for tomorrow, where we're going to go deeper into advanced joins, or Danning's going to take us into advanced joins, and also something called a window function, which is really useful but somewhat confusing, or at least it was confusing for me when I first encountered it. I saw that a bunch of people submitted their homework. Wasn't really a required submission, but appreciate everyone that did. I didn't get a chance to look at everyone's submission, but they mostly looked correct. Um, First thing I do want to cover, just quickly reviewing something from yesterday. Who can tell me the main difference between a join and a union in terms of columns?
So joins two columns together based on some common key. However, unions are used to join two rows together. So to simply put, whenever you're using unions, you will just add the rows of two tables that have the similar type of columns. However, in the case of joins, you will use the same or multiple tables in order to create new or existing columns. I hope that is clear.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Exactly. The main thing I was looking for there is just for joins, the columns don't have to be the same. For unions, the columns have to be the same. Um, and yeah, to be clear, yes, technically you're adding columns, and unions you're just adding rows. There are ways around that, but that is, as long as you understand that, then that'll be good to work with. Cool. So the prize feed yesterday was essentially just a join, so I don't think we got into demoing unions. Um, so the problem that JD set out is essentially, if you look at two Uniswap pools, right? So there's Uniswap V3 and Uniswap V2, and they both have a DPI ETH pool that was created. Um, how can we work with data from both of these pools, essentially, right? So JD has nicely created a few CTE for us based off of the pair mint and pair burn, essentially adding liquidity or removing liquidity. Let me actually check something. Um, let's go to Uniswap V2. I'm looking in events, pair sync, pair approval, pair transfer. Okay, cool. Yeah. Mainly I was just checking because I think I normally use the function call. Because I'm not. Did he cover router yesterday by chance? Did he cover what router 02 is?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Um, so Uniswap, and there's a few protocols that do this. Just because I'm sure if you look at some of these transactions of minting and burning, like if I do run this, you'll see that a lot of the times LP address, where's transaction hash? A lot of the times the transaction isn't actually going through the contract of the pair, it's going through a router. In this case, it's a migrator. Oh, okay. So this one is they're minting a token, and it's going through a migrator. But usually, what you have is two. Cool. Let's go here. essentially Uniswap created a router to abstract a lot of the concepts and like difficulties around working with the pair contract itself. Um, so it's kind of like this. I don't think my video is running of me, but it's kind of like you imagine you have the pair contract with DPI ETH on like the final end of things created out of the factory, but the user is going to submit like whatever they want to transfer in or out or swap in or out. They're going to submit that through the router, and the router is effectively going to figure out how do I get from DPI to ETH, right? Because sometimes you might have a case like, let's say you wanted to go from DPI to USDC in a swap. It's possible that DPI USDC isn't a pair that actually exists, right? So then you have to route it through DPI ETH and then ETH USDC. So it's actually going through multiple pools. And to kind of nicely format that, they have a router contract that abstracts that logic. I don't know why Etherscan's being slow for me, but that's an important point in which if you look deeper into Uniswap, you're going to see that a lot of people actually add their liquidity and they swap through this router, and they don't swap on they're not technically swapping on the pair. That's just a nuance I wanted to call out before we go deeper into this, because I'm sure that if you guys look into Uniswap queries more on Dune, you're gonna see people using different contracts as the base. Does that kind of make sense? Why there's a router?
Yeah, I guess this will be true for a lot of other decentralized exchanges as well.
Yeah. This would be true for I mean, SushiSwap is a fork, so yeah, SushiSwap has a router as well. Basically, most dexes will have some sort of router, because not all tokens, as you can imagine, like some of the more obscure tokens that people create might only have like a token to ETH pool, right? Or if you want to go between two obscure tokens, like we haven't gotten to DAO tokens, but a lot of DAOs have their own tokens. If you want to swap from like a DAO token to DPI or something, it would go through a router, just because it doesn't make sense to have a pool just for DPI, a pool for just DPI and that DAO token. Does anyone know why would it make sense?
Can you please rephrase your question again?
Sorry, yeah. So let's assume I have DPI. So I have DPI as a token. I have ETH, and then I have this token called FWB, right? And pretend that's like a DAO token. I have a DPI ETH pool. I have an FWB ETH pool. But I might not have a DPI FWB pool. So why doesn't it make sense to have a DPI FWB pool? I'm assuming it doesn't exist. I'm not checking, but I'm 99% sure it doesn't exist.
Is it because there isn't enough liquidity?
Yes, and why wouldn't there be enough liquidity?
If tokens are new, there's not enough activity.
Yeah, there's not enough swap volume, right? And if there's not enough swap volume, there's no reason for people to add liquidity to this pool. From a liquidity efficiency perspective, it makes a lot more sense for all of these tokens to be able to swap into ETH and have that as their base pool. And if they want to swap between these tokens, you just use router 02, and that'll take you DPI to ETH and then ETH to FWB, right? Cool. That's just some fun trivia to know, and that will help you understand a lot of the DeFi ecosystem as well. Well, because there's a bunch of different pools, both on exchanges and lending pools and such, where I think sometimes people get confused why certain pairs or pools exist and other pairs or pools don't exist. And it almost always comes down to liquidity efficiency. Okay, so do we all know what pair mint event here means? What does it mean if I'm minting off of a pair?
This means that I'm depositing a certain currency like Ether, and correspondingly, I'm getting a certain token in return. So this entire transaction will be called as minting from
Yep.
the 00, whatever that address was. It will be deposited back, something like that.
Yep. So essentially, mint here is just another way of saying I'm adding liquidity. Because I've added liquidity, say I've put in 1.5 DPI and 0.12 ETH into this contract, it's going to mint me a token that represents what I put in. It represents my deposit, essentially. All right. And burn just means the opposite. I want the DPI and ETH that I put in back, so I'm going to give my Uniswap V3 token back to the contract, and it's going to burn it and give me my DPI and ETH back, right? So essentially all I have here is the V3 adding liquidity and removing liquidity, and then the V2 adding liquidity and removing liquidity. All right. We've already done this. So I'm going to take that out. Can someone tell me how I would do this first one? How would I check? How would I list all of the unique addresses that have minted in both V2 and V3? Just logically, it doesn't have to be the exact words.
You just have to join both of them and then just distinct.
Sure. So if I join V3 mint, let's call it V3. And how would I join this?
Join on the LP address.
Okay. V2 mint. V2 dot. Do we call it address? LP address equals V3 dot LP address. And you already, I think you already said this, right? You said you wanted distinct, right?
Yeah, if that's what the question is. But yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And if I do this, it's going to give me an error. It says ambiguous. All right. So which do I want here? Does it matter if I do v2.lp address or v3.lp address?
I don't think it matters. It will generate the same result, like the same amount of LP addresses.
Okay. So let's
existing.
Right. So let's say that let's do this first.
Can this not capture all the V3 if you only minted on V3?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Wouldn't this not capture the addresses that only on V? So if the address does not exist in V2, but does exist in V3.
Right. So this is, and I don't know if I asked the question wrong, but this is technically this one, right? This would give me the addresses that have minted in both. If I did left join, and I think I have to add where.
I have a question. Why are we using left join here instead of a join, since it's in both V2 and V3?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I was going to say I could either do left join where v3.lp address is not null, right? I could do this because then this is going to give me the set of essentially the set of addresses that minted in V2 and V3. But if I didn't want to have this where, then I could make it even faster by doing an inner join. Right? And then this would have just immediately give me the overlap. Except inner joins do take a little longer. Cool. So there's 691 addresses. Actually, this might not be distinct yet. So let me do distinct. And that'll give me the unique. So there's 92 distinct liquidity providers, essentially, who've minted on both, who've provided liquidity on both V2 and V3. All right. And if I wanted who had minted in either, what would I change here?
You'd use a union.
Yeah, okay. I can do this with a union.
Do you want us to use the joins or?
It doesn't matter. I'm not looking for a specific answer.
Okay.
Though, do you have an answer with joins?
Yeah, I guess we'll use some kind of a full join and then add a case condition on top of that. That will also, but that will be not an efficient way of doing it. Union will be the best way to do it.
Yeah, you could do like full outer join, and then do a distinct, but that does take.
We
a
don't
little longer.
need distinct if we'll just use a union, right? Yeah, union doesn't. You don't
need distinct.
I think we
You
still
can do
do.
union distinct.
Yeah,
Right.
because it's adding the
Union
rows
is
on
distinct.
top of each other.
Yeah, union is distinct.
So, I mean, technically, I might actually be doing this a slow way right now, but one way I would probably do this. So if I do the union, that gives me, this is all the addresses that are in V3 and V2. Hold on, I'm having a brain
I'm just
fart.
saying, just remove all the distincts and remove the all as well. The entire statement is going to give you the distinct addresses. Yeah, remove the all and remove the yeah. That is a perfect answer. You don't have to make any subqueries.
Oh, really? Oh, that makes
Union
sense.
always. So whatever the union gives, it acts like a distinct at the top of the total outcome that you get. So that's the difference between union and union all. But union has a performance cost attached to it because it gives a distinct. So you need to be careful when you're using a union.
That's interesting. I didn't know that actually. Clearly you can tell that I always use union all.
Yeah, that's a good practice. You should always use union all. It's faster.
Yeah,
it's a lot faster to do it. Otherwise, a lot of people use union everywhere without thinking, and it really slows up their queries.
Yeah, I feel like I saw somewhere early on someone was like, "Don't do this." So I was like, "All right, I'm not going to do that." So for our sake, that is a valid answer. I think typically I would have just done this with a full outer join. Which might not be efficient, but address. Actually, what is the fastest way to get? So I can't do, technically, I can't just do this, right? If I do
No,
just
you will have to
this,
use some kind of coalesce or something.
Exactly,
You will have
yeah.
to use some kind of coalesce.
Yeah. And can you explain why I have to use the coalesce?
Because we're using OR, right? So if we do it something like this, we are going to miss out on a lot of addresses that are present in V3, but they're not in V2, and they will all come as nulls.
Exactly.
Because we are doing distinct.
Exactly. All right. And to show that off, let me do this. Let me just order by to. Okay, I didn't even have to order by. Great. So here you'll see that sometimes there's people in both. Sometimes V3 doesn't have someone and V2 does. Or am I backwards on that? V3 will have someone. Let me just rename this as V2. Okay, yeah. So sometimes they'll be in V3, they won't be in V2. Other times, if I go down here, they're going to be in V2, but oops. They're going to be in V2, but they're not going to be in V3, right? So if I take the coalesce, then it's basically going to say, okay, let's take this. And it doesn't matter if I have V2 or V3 first here. It's all the same. It's going to say, let's say it got to this row. If I had just put V3 LP address here, then it would show up as null, so it wouldn't give me anything, right? But it's going to see that that's null, and then it's going to go to the next column, which is V2 LP address, and it's going to say, oh, there's something here. Let's return that. All right, so I think I can do distinct coalesce. Does it let me? It does. So it's going to basically take all of the providers, and there's going to be duplicates at first, just because someone might have added liquidity multiple times, and then I'm just going to take the distinct. So there's 1,078 addresses that have added liquidity to either V2 or V3 DPI ETH. Does that make sense? And again, the other way we could have done this was just the join, so I'm going to leave that in there. Does anyone have questions on this? Cool. All right. So V3, not V2. I should write this from scratch. I'm just gonna do this one quickly, unless someone wants to suggest how they would do it. Oops. Right, so here I'm joining, I'm saying, all right, take everyone who's minted on V3 and then check basically like if they've minted on V2, then this LP address would not be null. But if they haven't minted on L2, then this would be null, right? So I can just say, all right, that's how I get my missing subset, basically. Or like minted on V3 only subset. And I think we can do that with this except thing too. I actually don't know the syntax for this because I always do things in joins. So someone corrects me if this is not how to do it. Actually, I have no idea if that works. Here, let's see. Except must have.
Put things into brackets, but yeah, I never really use except. But yeah, I think the select from in bracket.
So this has
sorry, the second.
Oh,
if
the
you're going to
second
accept
one.
and yeah.
I think this is actually my first time using except. Except query must have the same number of columns. Do they have different number of columns? No, we had a union working, right? All right, let's figure out why this isn't working. Except Postgres. All right, maybe we just. Does it only work on one column at a time? No way, right? That's not why it's not working, right? let's see. Does accept work on multiple columns? All right. The fact that I don't see any helpful answers.
It will work. It will, Andrew, it works on multiple columns. They have to be of the same data type. That is the catch.
Right.
So we need to ensure that the data types are the
It's the
same.
same table, so I'm surprised that selecting all doesn't work. But regardless, this will get
We should
us
not
our
use
accepts.
accept anyways. It's not a good way.
Yeah. We'll teach it because I think JD was suggesting it, but now you know it's here. But I highly recommend you just use this left join.
But that's
instead.
funny. It's not working. I guess I'll troubleshoot it.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's definitely the same number of columns.
Teju was saying something, right? Teju, you have any idea why this is not working?
Maybe not.
This is going to be kind of weird, but sometimes Postgres is this weird thing where you have to throw a semicolon after. So if you take accept out of the brackets and throw a semicolon, you can try it. Sometimes it.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the end.
Try it once.
Let's try that. Okay, I'm guessing these just don't have the same number of columns. Let's find out.
Yeah, it might be possible that the pair event burn and that might not have the same columns, right?
Yeah.
But is it not working for a single
it was working
column
for
as well
single. It
when
was
you're
working
using-
for single.
Yeah, then that is the only reason, I
Mount
guess.
0, Mount 1, contract address sender. Oh yeah, that's more. Okay. Tick lower, tick upper. Yeah, that makes sense. It's because V3 you add liquidity into ticks, right? You don't just add it into a pair. So it makes sense that there's extra columns, which is why we can't do this. And thankfully Dune has this search tool here, which makes it faster for me to check that. So we do have to do this, but I will put basically don't lose accept. Okay, cool. List all of the LP addresses that burned V2 liquidity in August 21 and also minted. Oh, this one seems like a lot of typing. I would have probably just added those where statements into my CTEs and then basically done the same things we've done above. So I'm not going to redo this. After union. That just kind of makes more sense to me. List the LP addresses that have minted both V2 and V3, but have not burned V2. Okay, so now we're going 3 tables. Does anyone have a suggestion here?
For my solution, I joined V2 mints and V3 mints together and then did a left join of that on the V2 burn. Where that's basically what I did. Where the V2 burn is null.
Yep.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense to me. Which is equals v2 dot address. v2 dot burn as v2b on I'm naming these terribly, but I'm sure everyone gets the point. And should this be is null or is not null? I think you already said this.
Yeah, is null.
Yeah. Great. Very good job, everyone. That's that's very nice. We got through that in less than 30 minutes. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions on that? We did do multiple joins here. So I think sometimes that does get confusing to keep track of. Something to note is that this, technically this, actually, what's a good way of explaining this?
I have a question if
Mhm.
anybody has the answers to this. So when I was doing this, I wasn't sure if writing join and then left join after would throw some error. So I put the first join where I was just joining V2 mint and V3 mint. I made it sort of like a subquery and then did left join on that. Does that make a difference, or is it like fine to just write it out in this way?
Right, yeah, that was going to be my question, was does it matter if we do these joins in a different order, right? Like, would that give us a different answer? I shouldn't have run it. But does anyone know?
Yeah, that will completely. I guess she's asking a different question, I think.
Yeah, I think you're asking if we should do it in a subquery, but I
Yeah.
think
Yeah. It will not make any change. I guess that is perfectly fine.
yeah. So to your point, the order in which you do the joins doesn't really matter. At least definitely not in this case, right? Because in this case, let's say I left join first, I'm gonna end up with extra, like this is gonna join on everything in V2 mint, right? And then this join is gonna get rid of basically those extra addresses in V2 that weren't in V3 anyways. I do. Oops. I'm actually not an expert in this, but oh no. I always forget this syntax.
Actually, Andrew, in some cases it might
Right.
change. So it
Right.
might work in some cases, but this is not always advisable.
Yeah, so it does.
does.
Yeah, exactly. So it does depend on the types of joins you're doing. Like, I think if you were doing like an outer join and an inner join in the same query, I'm pretty sure at that point the order would matter, right? Because if you did an outer join and then an inner join, should just give you nothing. That maybe is a bad example, because if you switch doing the inner join first and then an outer join, that will still give you nothing. Did I spell explain wrong here? Why is this not working? Explain. Boxer's not here, is he? No. Trying to remember how you can basically show the order in which this query is being executed usually. But for some reason it's not working here. Give me a quick second.
You need to type explain analyze at the top of the query, and this is not the top of the query. The top of the query starts
You
from
are right. Thank you. I forgot we did this up here. So essentially, if you start using explain analyze, it'll actually tell you what's being executed in what order. So in this case, I'm actually not a I'm not a pro at reading this at all. But you could probably read through this and start seeing like, okay, if there's a rows removed here, that's probably where the inner join happened. Is my guess. Yeah, I need to get better at reading explain analyze for when we optimize queries later on. But essentially, you can look at this stuff. So this hash anti-join should be a left join, I believe.
I guess this
No.
will also include the joins that are used inside the CT, so it will not be very easy to just explain this
Do we
part.
use? Oh, that's why. Okay.
Yeah,
I was like, where?
just
Why am I seeing so
just go
many
to the very end.
hashes? Yeah. So this isn't a good example, but essentially, this is a long way of saying, like, if you really wanted to check if the order of things matter, you could add explain analyze to the top of your queries. But in this case, it shouldn't make a difference. I normally just logically try to think through it, like, yeah, this should give me the same subset in both cases, just because it's these three tables aren't related. I think I'm trying to think of a situation where this might not work. I think if this was on
And any right join to the mix, it will not work. The moment you start mixing left and right joins. If you only use
yeah, that's a
left
good point.
joins and you do not use right join at all, which is like 99% of the people do, they never use right joins, then I think in a majority of the situations this will be all right. But ideally, yeah, we should not use right joins, I guess.
Yeah, I'll put this
No,
in
but
here. Join.
yeah, that is a wrong absolute statement to make. Matlab, I don't want everyone to think that you should not use right joins, but please avoid using right joins. It is not good for the people who read the query.
Yeah, right joins always give me a headache. Sorry, Teja, I know that was a really long-winded answer. But in this case, it shouldn't matter if you change the order in which you're doing it here, if you do it in a subquery first, because the rows that you would end up with is the same subset across the whole thing.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And sometimes, usually, I just try to sense check this stuff. Like, if the number of addresses I see at the end, like if I know there's like 600 addresses in V2 mint and 800 addresses in V3 mint, and my answer gives me like 30 or something, I might be like, okay, that's really small. Does it make that much sense for like so many people who have like burned their liquidity, right? Like, I guess one way of looking at this is like, if they've minted on V2 and minted on V3, I would probably have expected them to have burned their liquidity on V2, because the order I'd be expecting is I minted on V2, V3 came out, I burned on V2 to move that liquidity to V3. So the subset of people who've like minted on both V2 and V3 that haven't burned, so where is not null, I'm guessing this is smaller than the subset of people who have burned. It is not. I was wrong. All right. That's interesting.
Is this distinct?
Thank you. It is not. Do I need a coalesce here? I think I do. I was like, that does not. This is why we sense check. Because my logic was one way, and then I see 3,000 here, and I'm like, that doesn't seem right. So I eventually hopefully would have realized that I needed a distinct here. So this is 80. So that's the amount of people who have added liquidity to DPI ETH on both V2 and V3, but they haven't burned, right? Meaning that they must just have a bunch of that extra token lying around. The ones that have burned, it is actually smaller. So that means that there are 92 people who minted on both V3 and V2, and of those people, 12 of them burned their liquidity and probably migrated it, and 80 of those people just never migrated their liquidity. That's pretty interesting from a product perspective, right? You would hope that in V3, everyone would move off of V2. So that would probably bring in kind of extra questions to kind of research going onwards of like, what's different between the 12 people that did burn and migrate their liquidity versus the 80 people that never migrated. They just added new ones. Anyone have any thoughts on why that might be the case?
They lost their wallet addresses. Just kidding. I don't know. I don't have a logical answer.
Isn't the interface for V3 different from V2?
I don't know. So I typically add liquidity through Zapper. So I don't even know. I'm sure their interface has changed, but I don't even know what Uniswap's interface looks like for V2 versus V3.
Yeah, V3 definitely feels like a lot more, like you have to set up a lot more things before you do it. So it discourages you. I was trying to use Uniswap V3 2 days ago and I kind of gave up
Oh,
because
yeah. That makes
wasn't
sense.
sure what to do. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is my V. As you can see, I'm still on V2. Like, my positions are still on V2. So yeah, this is V2 interface. This is the V3 interface, which, what does it look like? I actually don't know.
Yeah.
It's like
Hey, this is Michael. I was listening. I was listening in the background, but I spent too much time on Uniswap V3. What was the question again? But yeah, of course, way more complexity on setting your own ranges and managing that and all that.
Yeah, so we're looking at this query of like how many people have provided liquidity on both V2 and V3 for DPI ETH.
Yeah.
And like, why is it that like of the 92 people who have added to the pool on both V2 and V3, only 12 of them actually migrated their liquidity, right? They actually burned their V2 position to move it to V3. And 80 of them just added it, right? And like, what would be a reason why they wouldn't have migrated from V2 to V3? I have one guess, but I've been putting it out there. Besides, so like interface complexity, maybe one of them. This is actually my first time playing with this tool. It's kind of cute.
Yeah, that slider was added fairly recently, maybe like a month or so ago. Yeah, it's nice.
Really? Okay. That
when the first launch, it was just type in your min max range. But yeah, definitely helpful here, like seeing the distribution like that as well.
Right. Except once you do full range, you can't drag back the max anymore.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's a UI.
Might go plus minus. So you're saying you're seeing people who
didn't essentially they didn't migrate their liquidity.
Yeah. So does that mean they kept it on V2 or they just removed it from V2?
They kept it on V2.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. I have a guess as well. I'll wait and see what yours is.
My guess is their position is too small to move, or like the gas cost doesn't make sense for them to move that.
Oh, yeah, that's one. My other guess was you're seeing it shift now, but a lot of liquidity mining still used V2.
Oh yeah, there we go. Both
plausible.
Yeah, both plausible. If anyone wants to look into that, I will put that as a possible.
Can you please repeat the second logic again? I was not able to hear it.
Oh, for mine about liquidity mining. So I think an example. I don't know who's still doing it now. But I know at one point, actually, like Index Co-op used to incentivize if you provided liquidity on Uniswap V2 for the DPI and ETH pair, you could stake that on the Index Co-op app and earn index tokens for doing that. And so and the reason why it was easier to do in V2 is that you just got a single, Uniswap V2 LP token representing whatever your deposit was. And there's no complexities around what your range was and things like that. With V3, there's kind of an added complexity of not just how much liquidity you provide, what your range was. So there was no, as like native, just take this token and like stake or provide rewards for staking that specific token. I've seen some, like now there's actually a Uniswap V3 staker, but probably and that's like just starting to happen now, but up until recently, really the only liquidity tokens you saw incentivized were for like staking and rewards were Uniswap V2, SushiSwap, which kind of uses a similar model. I guess Curve as well, but yeah, Uniswap and SushiSwap were pretty common as just general incentivized liquidity with the rewards. So if someone got rewards on V2 but would not get rewards on V3, then they probably just stick on V2. was kind of the logic there.
So you're saying there is a external economic incentive for some people to stay on V2.
Right. Yeah, that's a simple way to put it. Instead of my
Okay.
rambling.
Yeah.
Why would Index Corp want people to stay on V2? I'm not sure if you covered that.
Yeah, I think I'll have to check now. I think they're experimenting with V3 now. I think at the time there was no. I don't think there's like no contract that existed to do that. So I guess like maybe it could be. Yeah, I think it's around complexity of like how do you know. Trying to think of like a simple way to explain it, but I think it was just that like it was harder to have people just like submit their liquidity since it wasn't like a single token, since like your liquidity was represented by an NFT.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you have like a better way. I know I'm struggling to explain it. I don't know
Yeah, I mean, I would have said the same thing. I think like
yeah.
ERC20 is a lot easier to do rewards for than NFTs, because ERC20 is just like you store the balance of a certain address essentially. But if it's NFTs, you're storing token IDs, and then those token IDs like it's not like one token ID represents 1% of the liquidity pool. There's a lot of extra parameters that are stored on the Uniswap contract as metadata instead, right? And I think I haven't looked into the rewards contracts, but I think it's a lot harder once you have that extra layer of data that you need to work with to do your rewards programs.
Yeah, I've seen some try to say and say like, oh, if your liquidity is between these two tick ranges, then like we'll read that and incentivize you from that. I've seen some that build like a wrapper around it, where I guess like within that wrapper, you're essentially kind of transferring your NFT and they can adjust liquidity there. Probably explaining that oversimplified way, but beyond just like NFT versus ERC20, more complexity over, what if someone puts like a gazillion dollars into a range that never gets hit? Like you don't want to reward them for that.
Right. Yeah, yield farming is very fascinating overall, but a lot of these like rewards contracts go with like scalability. So like it's like, oh, they basically say if you deposit some sort of ERC20 token into this address, then it has a reward, right? And if you did something for Uniswap, you would have to essentially build a new contract for Uniswap specifically. And if Curve takes a different approach in like how they store their NFT like tick parameters, then you now need a new rewards contract for Curve as well, right? So it's not as scalable of like a rewards distribution system, like contract wise and development wise as well, which is also my rambly way of explaining this. But yeah, everyone loves to be able to do rewards in just one contract, ideally. But yeah, so those are extra questions. I think if anyone wants to look into that, I'll give a hint. Look at size of balance or size of liquidity provided, and also look at where the LP token is currently sitting. And this gets back to what we were doing last week. Is it sitting in the user's wallet or another contract? All right, because if it's sitting in another contract, you can probably guess that other contract is a staking contract. No one just sends their LP token to a contract with no reward. So yeah, that's actually a really, really cool question to look into. There is one thing I wanted to go over to kind of help with. Let me put this in the chat. Yeah, I actually know very little about V3. All I know is Michael's the expert on that. He has a great... Michael, I don't know if you want to link your dashboard into the chat, maybe. That'll help people.
Yeah. I'll figure out which one to put in.
Yeah, so the last thing I do want to go over for helping us tomorrow. So yesterday we did a price feed, right? Essentially, this is just taking like I think we did a bunch of stuff here. Oh, we did it on contract, right? So we could have just done, and I think someone brought this up in the chat, but we could have just done prices USD where symbol equals DPI, right? Because symbol is inside of prices here. I'm gonna date trunk minute. No, it's day that goes here, right? Day, minute, day, price. Let's do average price. Let's do that. Oh, right. And we might as well order by one. Right. So this is a shorter way of doing this price feed for now, where I'm getting the daily price of DPI. All right. So let's say I actually had multiple tokens. All right. Let's say I wanted to look at 2 tokens. And let's say I wanted to look at MVI, which is the Metaverse Index. I'm gonna go to Etherscan, copy the contract address. I technically don't need this. But what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna create a new table within this CT. So I'm gonna say that the 2 columns are symbol and address. And I'm gonna say that this 2 tokens table is gonna have a symbol of DPI, and I'll put the address, I don't remember it right now, and MVI, like this. All right, and DPI is over here. Okay, comment that out. So essentially what I've created here is a new table, and the table is called 2 tokens, and its 2 columns are symbol and address. And I basically, you just put parentheses around each row, and you can put as many rows as you want in here. This is good for loading in custom data, and I think Trevor showed some of this off in some of his queries before, which is how he brings in rabbit holes user addresses. One thing to note is that you do want to typecast the first row, otherwise you're gonna run into issues later. You don't have to do this on every row, just the first one, so that Postgres can recognize what you're querying. So we have select from these 2 tokens, right? Let's say I wanted to get the day minute for each of these. So I would say select symbol from 2 tokens, and I would add symbol here and do in the group by. I hope I don't have a logical error here. I don't think I do. And I also hope MVI is in here. MVI is not. All right, so we're gonna have to do, hold on. I'm checking the column names. Okay, so let's do contract address instead, because I think MVI is not in there. Which makes sense. It's a newer symbol. In fact, I might just do this. It's It's only showing up as DPI. Okay, that's a problem. I think I need to do... Yeah, okay, so this isn't in... So this is just showing DPI because MVI isn't in here at all. So let me just take wrapped ether instead. Can someone tell me what the difference between wrapped ether and ether is? While I pull this up. Anyone?
Ether is a native currency, but wrapped Ether is ERC20 compatible.
Right. Thank you. In case anyone's confused, I'm just going to join 2 tokens instead. On TT dot equals P dot contract address. It's pretty much the same, but I want to have the symbol from, let's do symbol from TT. I should probably do where a minute is greater than 1 day. This is going to take too long. Cool. All right. So this is the last day average price. So let's say I just wanted the most recent price, right? So let's say that I didn't have this as the day. I just wanted by the minute what was the most recent price. What are some of my options on how to do this? I want the most recent price for DPI and ETH.
I will use a row number windowing function. I'll partition them over the symbol or the contract address, and then using a subquery or a CTE, I will use the rank is equal to 1 or the row number equal to 1.
Right.
Depending upon how you are going to partition. So
yeah, that works. Is there a way to do it without using a window function?
yes.
But it's probably a lot messier. So for the sake of time, essentially, and this is going to be covered tomorrow, but I just want to show it off now. We can actually create these extra rows, or this extra column that counts basically based on your parameters. All right, so I'm saying I want to count each occurrence of DPI and WETH, and I want to count up by the minute. All right, so this is going to be like, all right, for each minute that the price updates for WETH, it's going to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, 6, etc. Let me do TT. All right. I don't have a group by anymore. So you'll see that this is the 1,434th occurrence of DPI. And this is also the 1,434th occurrence of WETH. If I take out the partition, can anyone tell me what this number is going to be? That loaded too fast. It's going to be double, right? Because essentially now it doesn't care the symbol. It's just saying there's 2,868 rows. This is the 2,868th row from the first minute. If I go descending, what row number is going to show up here?
1.
Yep, it's going to give me 1, right? So this is basically, this window function is just saying, all right, I'm going to do some sort of function over some criteria. It's kind of like a mini group buy is like one way you can think about it. So I'm going to say that this is row number. I know we're up on time. And essentially, I just want the most recent one, right? So I can change this whole thing to a subquery or a CTE. I'll put this in here. And I'll call this X, and I'll just say where row numbers equal to 1. And this will give me just the most recent price of each symbol, right? This gets very useful for when you're trying to get like most recent of like a DEX trade or most recent like NFT sale or something. And you might be doing it across a set of contract addresses. This becomes very useful then, right? So Danny is going to go much deeper into this tomorrow, but just so you can kind of start thinking about it and playing with it if you want. This is a window function, and this is basically the last main SQL concept that we're going to cover. So yeah, you're almost there from a SQL perspective. So. All right. I know people probably have questions. We'll probably go again. We're going over this more tomorrow. If anyone does have questions on this right now, feel free to put it into the chat. Otherwise, yeah, just take a look at this query, and if you want, attempt this bonus question here. And I'll see you guys all tomorrow.